just to exist authentically. I won't spend a dollar or another minute or another ounce of energy supporting people who contribute to making that fight harder.
Wait, did you catch that? They are literally burning a WNBA jersey in the middle of the street over a common sense sports opinion. This just escalated to a whole new level of crazy.
Jersey used to represent someone I respected as an athlete. Today it represents something I can't support anymore. Sports have the power to bring people together, but when someone uses their platform to demonize or marginalize an already vulnerable community, I have to decide where I stand. So today I'm not burning a person, I'm burning my support. As a trans woman, I've spent years fighting.
Look closely at how quickly this escalates. This person is taking absolute destruction to a sports jersey just because a female athlete wanted biological women to play against biological women. Have we completely lost the plot here? We're at a point where having a totally mainstream, scientifically grounded opinion about women's sports gets you labeled as some sort of villain, and they literally torch your name in the street. You can see the pure anger in the body language, but the irony is completely lost on them. They talk about standing up for vulnerable communities while aggressively destroying the property and representation of a female athlete trying to protect her own sports category. It's wildly performative. The amount of energy being spent on trying to cancel someone for a basic biological reality is staggering. It makes you wonder how long this level of outrage can even be sustained before people just get exhausted by it. Pay attention to the neighborhood in the background too. Just a quiet, normal street, and suddenly it's the backdrop for an extreme political meltdown over women's basketball. Just wild.
With the exception of being a cisgender male, everything about how I was born has put me at the current center of a damaging and widely accepted myth. That myth is that gayness orbits around straightness, transgender orbits around cisgender, and that all races orbit around whiteness. And it is a myth that keeps money and power in the hands of the few instead of being invested in the lives of the free.
Did you actually just process what a massive Hollywood A-lister is saying on a public stage? Anne Hathaway is standing up there, dressed in high couture, completely detached from everyday reality, delivering a speech that sounds like it was generated by an activist buzzword algorithm. She's lecturing the public on how everything in society orbits around whiteness and identity. It's the ultimate peak of celebrity elite guilt on display. Think about the irony here. A multimillionaire actress whose entire life and career have been built on immense privilege and industry connections is trying to lecture regular working-class Americans about power dynamics. It's almost theater. Look at the calculated delivery, the dramatic pauses. She's acting. This isn't a genuine grassroots plea. It's a carefully crafted performance for her specific Hollywood echo chamber to secure social credit points. The disconnect between these elite galas and the actual struggles of normal people buying groceries and paying rent is staggering. They genuinely believe they are saving the world from the podium while completely alienating everyday folks.
I used to be a liberal and I hated Charlie Kirk. I never actually watched any of his debates or anything like that. I just saw all the clickbait and the most horrible things until recently when I went to YouTube and I started watching some of his debates in, the full clip, not just that little part where he says something horrible. And I realized that I am a fucking monster because he never said anything hateful or untoward or disrespectful. All he was a man of opinions, and he disagreed.
Wait, pause and look at her realization here. This is actually a massive cultural shift happening in real time. She's admitting that she used to completely despise Charlie Kirk, entirely based on short, manipulated clickbait clips that her echo chamber fed her. But the moment she actually sat down and watched a full, unedited debate in context, her entire perspective shattered. This is a huge testament to how heavily edited media controls our perception of people. She realized that he wasn't screaming hateful things, he was just stating opinions she disagreed with. The honesty here is incredibly rare. Most people will double down when their worldview is challenged, but she's openly admitting she was conditioned to hate a false caricature. Notice how casual she is about it. She's just sitting in her room, recording a raw thought, and it speaks volumes about the silent awakening happening among young voters. They are getting tired of being told who to hate and are finally going to the primary sources to figure things out for themselves. It's a complete collapse of the traditional media gatekeeping model.
To terminate the filibuster, everybody call John Thune at the Senate. He's the leader of the Republican Party, and tell him to get this stuff approved. Terminate the filibuster and approve everything. Because the Democrats are going to do it. The Democrats are going to terminate the filibuster as soon as they have a chance. And then they're going to approve Puerto Rico and D.C. as a state. They got 4 more senators. They're going to end up with 12 more congressmen. They're going to get like 40 electoral votes. If they are allowed to do that, by that time I'll be sitting home. And I'm not a big crier. I don't think you want to see me cry, you know? There are some people, they do very well when they cry. But you don't want to see me cry. But I may be crying when I'll be sitting home and I'll say I told them. They got to really terminate the filibuster, get everything approved right away. Because you're going to have a stoppage. You're going to have a stoppage in September. The Democrats won't approve everything. They become deranged, like deranged Jack Smith. Remember that?
Listen to the sheer urgency in this rally clip. Trump is laying out exactly what the political battlefield looks like, warning his base that the moment the opposition gets the chance, they will nuke the filibuster to push through massive electoral changes. Look at the crowd's reaction. They know exactly what's at stake. Whether you love him or hate him, you have to admit his ability to forecast political maneuvering is sharp. He's pointing out that the filibuster is the only guardrail left preventing a complete overhaul of the system, including adding states just to stack the Senate. This isn't just standard rally rhetoric. It's a high-stakes warning about structural changes to the republic. The political chess game being played here is intense. Notice the body language and the pacing of his delivery. He's not just hyping them up. He's trying to educate his voters on Senate procedural rules that could drastically alter the future of the country. It's a stark reminder that the biggest battles aren't always at the ballot box, but in the legislative rulebook.
You read recently in New Jersey where tremendous numbers of people were found out that they were on the voter rolls totally illegally, and that's all over the country. That's nothing compared to what's going on in California and Minnesota and so many other states. And hopefully there will be no mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots are inherently corrupt, except for illness, disability, military deployment, or travel. If you're in the military, you're far away, absolutely. If you have to go someplace, absolutely. But mail-in ballots have proven to be a disaster. We're the only country in the world that in this form does them.
Script 5. The cultural shift happening right now is insane. Drop a comment on what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.
Dolls, they're being introduced to kids as young as 4 years old starting this fall. Now, it's one of many pro-transgender funded programs under Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Now, that company, My Gender Dolls, they're selling these dolls with interchangeable accessories where the genitalia can be removed and swapped from doll to doll. They also can...
Wait, did you catch what they are putting in classrooms right now? Interchangeable anatomy dolls for 4-year-olds. Yes, you heard that right, and it's completely tax funded. We need to look closely at what is flying under the radar today.
Swap their hairstyles and clothes. The company says they're designed for kids, specifically ages 4 to 10 years old. The dolls were given gender-neutral names, Sam, Rory, and Avery. The company...
Look at the actual breakdown of this program. We just saw the concept, but the reality is these kits are being pushed into early education settings for kids as young as 4, entirely backed by state innovation funds. Notice how the graphic highlights the specific age bracket? At 4 years old, kids are barely learning to tie their shoes, yet they are being introduced to highly complex, clinical-level gender identity concepts through structured play. The phrasing used, gender-affirming clinical practice, is heavily academic and being applied directly to toddlers. It completely bypasses standard parental consent frameworks. What is really wild here is the lack of transparency. When these state-level grants get approved, they are usually bundled into massive educational packages. Parents send their kids to school thinking they are getting standard early childhood development, but instead they are encountering highly specialized, culturally attuned therapeutic modules without any prior notification. It really makes you question where the exact line is drawn between basic public education and forced ideological integration.
Is pointing fingers after a report showed homelessness in the City of Angels has risen by 3.4% just since last year. Now, that same report also found the number of unsheltered people, those living on the streets or even in cars, was up by almost 8%. But Bass says it's not her fault. Nope, she is instead blaming high costs on the Trump administration. Quoting now, "For 2 straight years, we drove down homelessness by historic margins, but as expected, last year our efforts ultimately couldn't keep up with policies and funding cuts at the federal and state levels that pushed more people onto the streets."
All right, watch the background footage in this clip closely. You see the massive scale of these encampments right off the freeways in Los Angeles. The mayor is actively blaming the previous federal administration for a 3.4% spike in homelessness just this past year and nearly an 8% rise in the unsheltered population. But if you look at the timeline, the math completely contradicts the political maneuvering. The city has poured billions of local and state tax dollars into this exact crisis over the last few years. How can local policies fail so drastically, yet the blame gets passed up the federal ladder? It's a classic deflection tactic. You can physically see the heavy machinery having to clear out structures that have been entrenched for months. These aren't overnight pop-up tents. These are established, semi-permanent settlements that were allowed to grow under current local watch. When leaders say they drove it down by historic margins, but the visual reality on the streets shows absolute chaos, there is a massive disconnect. It's all about shifting the accountability away from the local office.
Consider yourself a socialist?
Yes.
Some of their policies include abolishing ICE and the Senate.
I agree with abolishing ICE.
I don't think that the Senate is currently working or doing the work that we hope that they would do.
Do you think we should abolish ICE and end mass deportations?
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
How do you guys feel about extending voting rights to all permanent residents, not only citizens, even restoring voting rights to people that are incarcerated?
If you're a permanent resident, absolutely should have a say.
Yeah.
If they're here illegally, isn't that a crime per se?
Not to me.
Who do you think socialism is appealing to? Like what group of people?
The people that are here looking for handouts.
I would say like liberal Democrats.
Bunch of college students. It's a bunch of dudes in their mom's basements, and, never been on a date and just angry at life and just a lot of performative activism.
There's new data that shows it's highly educated with moderate income. So do you think there's a certain reason why these people are being attracted to kind of socialism and DSA?
Yeah, because they're not depending.
Look at the sheer confidence of the people being interviewed on the street right here in New York City. When asked about completely dismantling federal immigration enforcement and abolishing the Senate, some of these responses are entirely casual, as if these aren't foundational pillars of the government. Did you catch the guy in the blue shirt? He's essentially shrugging off the idea of illegal border crossings as a non-issue. But here's the fascinating psychological angle. When you actually press people on the logistical reality of housing undocumented migrants in their own neighborhoods, the tune changes instantly. It's the ultimate not in my backyard syndrome. People love the idea of progressive, borderless policies when it's an abstract concept being filmed for a quick social media clip. But notice how defensive the posture gets when the financial burden or physical space is brought up. The disconnect between performative activism and real-world application is staggering. These interviews perfectly capture how modern political buzzwords have completely overtaken basic civic understanding on our streets today.
You just give me sort of a true or false on these. Abolish the Senate.
True.
Okay. Replace the presidency and Supreme Court as we now know them.
Yep.
Abolish ICE.
Absolutely.
Abolish borders and give amnesty to anyone currently in the U.S. illegally.
As a long-term plan, yep.
Defund the Pentagon.
Listen carefully to the visual pacing of this rapid-fire interview. The on-screen graphics are laying out a platform that sounds almost like a parody: abolishing the Senate, dismantling the Pentagon, completely defunding police departments. And the co-chair doesn't even blink. It's wild because she later describes the United States Senate as an anachronistic institution. That's a highly calculated academic phrase used to delegitimize a core branch of the federal government. Notice how there is zero hesitation. This isn't just fringe online chatter anymore. This is the formalized, stated platform of a major political offshoot getting national Sunday morning airtime. They are openly advocating for replacing the presidency and the Supreme Court with an executive body entirely subordinate to Congress. It's a literal blueprint for overhauling the entire constitutional republic, being presented with the same casual tone you'd use to order a coffee. The absolute normalization of this extreme rhetoric on mainstream television is the real story here. They are aggressively moving the Overton window right in front of our eyes.
Democratic Party net favorability. Back in 2018, when Democrats were able to take control of the House, they were actually on the plus side of the ledger. They were actually in positive territory at plus 1 point. Look now in 2026. We're not just talking down there underneath the Potomac. We're talking down there with the Titanic. We're talking 24 points underwater. And this is just the party overall. This isn't the congressional leadership. This is the party. The party. It's just a terrible, terrible, terrible brand.
Pay close attention to the data visualization they are using here. The chief data analyst is literally pointing at a sinking ship. You go from a net positive favorability just a few years ago to a staggering negative 24 points today. That is a massive, historic collapse in public trust. And did you catch that specific metric on the next board? 57% of voters now say the party has moved way too far outside the mainstream. When you look at the trend line, it's not just a slight dip, it's a total nosedive. The network realizes how unprecedented this is. People are feeling the economic pinch, the border crisis, and the heavy-handed policies, and it is finally reflecting in the raw numbers. It's not just the opposition party disliking them. This indicates that moderate, middle-of-the-road voters have completely jumped ship. When major news networks have to stand in front of giant red arrows pointing straight down and admit that the brand is highly toxic, you know the internal polling must be absolutely terrifying for their strategists.
Capitol Newsroom, one state Republican lawmaker is trying to push Illinois to have no taxes on tips. After the federal government approved no tax on tips, Illinois decoupled itself from some federal tax policies. That meant service workers' tips are still being taxed in this state. Representative Ryan Spain has been pushing for the measure for the last 10 months. He says Democrats shouldn't get in the way of a good idea.
Just because Donald Trump put an initiative forward to have no tax on tips and no taxes on overtime doesn't mean it's a bad idea. And so we have to get past this notion that if our political enemy comes up with an idea, we're going to do everything we can to.
Check out the details in this local Illinois broadcast. We are looking at a state representative having to fight tooth and nail just to implement a basic no tax on tips policy for service workers. Notice how they are showing the IRS building and the W-2 forms? It highlights just how bureaucratic this has become. The federal government signaled a move to stop taxing service industry tips, but the state of Illinois actively decoupled itself from that federal policy so they could keep taking a cut from waitresses and bartenders. It is incredible. The state is literally going out of its way to ensure that the working class keeps paying income tax on the cash they make at the end of a hard shift. Why would any local government fight against giving service workers a break? It reveals a complete addiction to tax revenue. They would rather squeeze the people serving food and pouring drinks than adjust their own bloated state budgets. It's a perfect example of politicians putting revenue collection over the actual financial survival of their constituents. Hit that subscribe button if you want to keep seeing what the mainstream is trying to slide past you. See you in the next one.
Biggest story this week was the Democrat governor in New Jersey admitting that 6,600 illegals were accidentally registered to vote and hundreds of them actually voted.
Stop scrolling right now. A major politician just admitted on live television that thousands of ineligible people were accidentally registered, and it's causing absolute chaos behind the scenes.
This news poll indicates overwhelming support for voter identification requirements. 83% favored the photo ID mandate for registering to vote. 77% supported for actually voting.
Hold on, let's talk about these numbers for a second because they are massive. 83% of people are demanding valid photo ID to register, and 77% want it just to cast a ballot. We are talking about overwhelming, across-the-board agreement from the public. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you usually stand on, these numbers prove that almost everyone wants tighter security. But what's crazy is the massive disconnect between what the public is begging for and what's actually happening at the legislative level. You have everyday citizens screaming for basic verification, yet there is this massive resistance from the people in charge to actually implement it. Why is it so hard to pass something that 8 out of 10 people agree on? It really makes you question who these policies are actually serving if they completely ignore the vast majority of the country. Look at the absolute panic happening right here. The pressure is getting cranked up to levels we haven't seen all year. There's a massive push to completely terminate the filibuster if the Save America Act doesn't get pushed through immediately. Think about the stakes. This isn't just standard political theater. This is an all-out demand to rewrite the rules of the Senate. The strategy is to force a showdown right before everyone is supposed to leave for the August recess. If they break the filibuster, it opens the floodgates for everything from budget overhauls to tackling the debt ceiling without any gridlock. It's a nuclear option. Notice the intense urgency in the demand? They know the clock is ticking before the midterms, and they are willing to risk everything to force this vote. This is the kind of aggressive maneuver that completely reshapes the landscape overnight. Drop a comment and tell me what you think is really going on here. Hit subscribe and I'll catch you in the next one.